Welcome back to Think Tech. We're here, we're live, we're in Pioneer Plaza. I'm Jay Fidell. With me today, Ken Sheffield of Morgan Stanley and Justin Simcock of Academia Language School. And what do these guys have in common? They both have traveled in Asia and spent substantial time in substantial positions, in substantial, what do you call it, embedded in Asia. And we're doing this program only next week, actually, on August 22nd at the Plaza Club, a luncheon panel program we call Don't Be Afraid to Send Your Kid or CEO to China. You know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words are out of the United States Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the People's Republic. Okay, so there is such a thing in the People's Republic. We're gonna explore that today with Ken Sheffield and Justin Simcock. Well, welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you for coming down today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so you are our models. You are the guys who have been there, done that, and you're back here with us now. So we want to find out what made you go, what you did, and why, and how. And now that you're back, why did you come back? You know, it's the Dave Heenan graceful exit question. Why and when and what was your analysis in coming back? So let's talk to you first, Ken. What happened?
Well, my initial interest in Asia percolated from the time, first summer after the first year at UH, I was doing some commercial fishing in Alaska, a small town called Cordova Fishing Village. There happened to be a small cafe and bookstore, and there was a Thomas Cleary book on Asian philosophy that I picked up to be able to read out on the boat. And I was just enthralled with Confucius and Zhuangzi stories contained therein. And that sort of set my heart on fire to find out a little bit more about Asia.
Good for you. God, amazing things happen in Alaska. Give some guys a little peace and quiet and see what happens.
That's right. That's right.
Go in the outback and things happen. Okay, so what happened after that?
So I started studying Chinese at UH. Also, as an Asian Studies undergraduate at UH, you were able to sample from the different disciplines and departments of the university. So I focused on China area history, economics, as well as Chinese theater of all things. I studied Beijing opera for a good part of my degree at UH.
Inquiring mind.
Yes.
I'm learning a lot about you, Ken.
Thank you. I hope you like what you're learning.
The question is whether they like.
I sincerely hope you do too, audience. Thank you.
Okay, so keep going.
Yeah, well, at that point, after my third year at UH, I did a fourth year abroad under the auspices of a newly formed agency or program, actually, joint between the Department of Defense and the National Security Agency. It's called the National Security Education Program, and that was founded by David Boren, Senator and chair of the Select Intelligence Committee at that time, 1994. And as an inaugural year grantee, I was given a grant to be able to study at Nanjing University for an entire year.
Let's look at the map of China, and maybe you can help us point out where Nanjing is. Is it in the west or the east, the south or the north?
It is up the river from Shanghai, the Yangtze River. In China, they call it the Changjiang, the Long River. Mm-hmm. And it is actually has served through about half the dynasties of the millennia as the second or one of the capitals. Nanjing actually means the southern capital, where Beijing means northern capital.
Interesting. So what size of city is Nanjing?
Oh, at this point, it would probably be 20, 30 million, just a rough guess.
Is it one of those spread out cities, or is it more intense?
It's fairly concentrated, though. In '94, it's going to be a lot different than it is now. I believe the last time I was in country was around 2010, and that was to southern China. So I haven't been back to Nanjing since '96. So I would assume that the province is Jiangsu province. It's one of the richest and most vibrant economic provinces of China at this point. And it's I would expect that it would be the very concentrated, densely populated city in a very densely populated province.
What are its calling cards? Is it into manufacturing, agriculture, natural resources? What?
At this point, I believe manufacturing would likely be a great part, although agriculture as well, and then also academia.
So, the law is Nanking is where the rape of Nanking happened. Is
That's
Nanking
right.
and Nanjing, is that the same place?
That is, sir.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. You weren't involved in that, were you?
No, I wasn't. There's actually a museum there that commemorates the suffering that went on during that period.
That was in
And
the Second World War.
That's right. That's right. And it's a very haunting memorial.
So, okay, now you were involved with NSEP. May I call that November Sierra Echo Papa?
Yes, you may,
Does
sir.
that work for the Navy, actually, Justin? Just going back to my own naval experience.
Oh, very good.
Sure.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful program. They will pay your way, not only to China, but to regions of the world where security related languages that we need to develop within our own citizenry, you could learn them directly from local sources.
So what were you there to do? And if you can tell us about it.
Absolutely. I was there to become engaged with the local community through my time there at the university. In fact, they had a program, this is the only program at the time, where they would link us up with Chinese students at Nanjing University, and we'd live together. It turned out that I found that at the end of my time there, my roommate was the youth party leader for the Communist Party for the school. I didn't know that going in, but you've got me coming in on Department of Defense money, and across the street there's their Public Security Bureau, which is their intelligence service. So I felt intensely watched during my time.
Did they think that you were an operative?
I could only assume so. Yeah, there was another woman also under the auspices of this program, and I can't speak for her experience, but I would only guess that she felt that same way too. And to a large degree, that was a point in time in the mid-90s where we stood out. As we walked around, people would point and issue salutations in English towards us. Hello, okay, and very, very wonderful and open people on the person-to-person level. Sometimes governments get together and they have their clashes, but on the personal level, very
Isn't
warm
that
people.
true?
Yeah.
That's a very important lesson. What about the language itself? Did you speak Mandarin before you went there, or did you learn it while you were in country, I think was the term you used?
That's right.
It sounds like Vietnam, actually.
I did my first year at UH with a wonderful person, Stephen Fleming. He was my first year language teacher, and just based on that experience, I applied for this grant. The department let some of us know that, hey, there's a new grant, you can travel abroad, and I certainly took advantage of that, and it's changed my life as a result of doing that.
The experience,
Absolutely.
but let's talk about the language.
Sure.
So were you conversational by the time you went to China?
I didn't speak very much. I could eke out, please give me a Coca-Cola, or I want that. But not very many people in China at the time spoke English, so I was very much forced to get up to speed quickly.
It's
with the
immersion,
language.
total
Absolutely.
immersion. And you have no choice. That's the way to learn a language. Come into the situation with a little language, and then the situation forces you to learn lots more.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, and how long did you spend there?
I spent one school year, academic year 94 to 95, which was my fourth year of undergrad.
So this was an extension of a whole UH experience then.
That's right.
So this is what kids do these days, right? They take
That's
a
right.
year and go somewhere else, and it's part of their academic experience. It's great.
I was lucky enough to be able to have the government pay for it, and I'm very thankful
Yeah.
to our fellow taxpayers for helping fund that.
And we, the taxpayers, are happy that you went.
Thank you, sir.
We endorse your trip retrospectively, of course.
Thank you, Jay.
Well, let's turn to you, Justin. It
Sure.
was different for you.
A bit different, yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhat
Tell me, by the way, would you move your mic up?
Okay,
Both
yeah,
of you
sure.
guys move your mic up. This between the first and second button, that'd be better.
How's that better? Okay. My background's similar, but of course different. I learned Chinese in the United States at the Defense Language Institute, which is in Monterey, California.
Oh, everybody knows Monterey. That's really that's a high pressure place, isn't it?
It can be, yeah.
It's
but
immersion.
Yeah.
Like 6 weeks. Everything was 6 weeks. it takes 6 weeks to mend a broken bone. It takes 6 weeks to learn at Monterey, right? That's what you're saying.
That's actually Middlebury in Vermont.
Oh, sorry.
I did that too, though. But
Did you have special propensities with language? I guess you must have. They
I
must
did,
have tested you
I
and
did,
found, Justin, you really got a talent in language.
They,
Is that something you inherited, or what is it? How do you get a talent in language like that?
Well, I think we all have a talent in language. We're basically symbolic creatures, but I was aware at a fairly young age that I knew how to sort of deconstruct the system. But they give you a test called a D-Lab, and it's a sort of
stand for?
Defense Language Aptitude Barrier, battery rather, yeah.
Mhm.
And then you have to identify the structure of the language. You have like an hour to break it down, and the grammar and what's a particle, all this type of very confusing grammar stuff. And then from there, they basically elect what language you'll learn. So mine was not my own choice, in fact. So I was told I was
already in the service.
I was not, actually. I did this, and then I knew that I wanted to do this language thing.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, they selected me to go to do Chinese at some point after.
So you went into the service so you could do this.
Yes.
You had your mind.
Yes, absolutely.
That's good. Good
Yeah,
for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Join the Navy and see the language.
For sure.
And the world.
And the world. Basically saw the library the whole time, though, just studying all the time.
Okay. What an education.
It was good. I got lucky.
Okay, so you went to Monterey, and you also went to where in Vermont?
Middlebury as
Middlebury,
well.
Vermont.
Yes.
Both of them back to back.
Different sequencing, but I went to Monterey for Chinese, and then back to Middlebury for Chinese and Portuguese as well. So,
Portuguese. I can understand Chinese as the strategic language. I mean, it should be for all of us. But what about Portuguese? Why is Portuguese a strategic language?
because Brazil and China have a lot of interaction right now, and the United States and Brazil were fairly significant trading partners, and the relationship that was going to emerge and how that might be an issue between the United States, Brazil, and China. So I wanted to understand that. So that was.
It was your choice? Or
That was my choice, actually. Yeah.
So you made that analysis?
That was my analysis.
That they were trading partners. And indeed, it must have been around that time when the Chinese built a huge steel plant in Brazil, right? And there was some contention about that.
For sure.
Where they owned the plant, and it was a win-win-win for them. And the Chinese, the Brazilians had some jobs out of it, but not much more.
Right.
But that was there was a big connection, right around the middle 2000s in there somewhere.
That was the MMX deal, I believe, and there's been a number of investments in Brazil since then, and as well throughout Latin America, and so I was fairly interested in that, but I ultimately.
What did you study in terms of, political science, contemporary history, civilization, to make you interested in these issues?
It was just understanding what's at stake, I guess, and what's available. But either way, what's at risk and what's at stake and what's available.
Where'd you go to school before you went into the Navy?
I went to school in Boston University, and then joined the Navy, and then came out here.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, the Navy brought you out here.
I was right out here for the Navy, so this is I'm back in Honolulu. Yeah.
Okay, so now they teach you the language, both of these languages to some extent.
Yeah.
And they ship you off to China.
No, actually, this is the unique part. You come to Hawaii.
Okay. All right. Well, there's a lot of Portuguese people here.
Unexpectedly so. I was, I had never thought about coming to Hawaii. It was the bill. I didn't even know what it was, in fact. And then they sent me out here, and then I lived here for 4 years. There's a lot of stuff happening within the Pacific region here, obviously, and so I was based here, focusing on those events, and because a lot of stuff, has happened, and so I left that position in 2010, and I moved to Beijing at that point.
It's only 3 years ago.
So fairly recently, yeah. And I did so as a private citizen on my own.
Is that right? So you're out of the service
I was out
in
of the service.
2010.
Yep.
And you say, Justin, let's go to China. Go west, young man.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
Precisely. That's
the
where
horizon.
that was the El Dorado.
What
right?
are you going to do there?
I was going to execute on this idea that I had about Latin America and Brazil and China, and insert myself within this milieu of opportunity and risk and all this sort of things that were going on. But I'm back here, so it must not have worked.
Incredible. I mean, I think that's really admirable. Okay, so you get to China. Tell us about the trip. Ken, you don't mind if we listen to this? Huh?
I'd love to hear it. Again, we spoke about it Friday over my time. So.
Yeah.
That's Ken Sheffield. Next to me, that's Justin Simcock. These guys have a lot in common in the sense they both went to Asia. They both learned the language. They both, smelled the flowers, as it were.
It was, yeah.
And they both came back to tell us about it. This is ThinkTech Asia in Review here on a given Tuesday.
Tuesday afternoon, yeah.
And we're talking about how travel is broadening to those who choose to live in Asia. We'll be right back after this break. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell. I want to tell you about our program this month. We're doing a lunch and panel program at the Plaza Club with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association and ThinkTech about China. It's Don't Be Afraid to Send Your Kid or CEO to China. Stories of daring do and of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the People's Republic. We want to introduce you to some people who have lived in China and show you that life in China is not so bad. It's not all about corruption and environmental degradation and lack of civil or human rights. It's not like that. And we want to have them tell you their day-to-day stories about how they've lived there. So our moderator is Larry Foster. He has taught law in China, and he has been practicing law in China for a firm in Shanghai. His wife, Brenda Foster, is on the panel. She has been the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. We have Russell Liu. He's an attorney practicing with Shepard Mullen in Beijing for quite some time. Shackley Raffetto, a circuit court judge from Maui, who after retiring went to China so he could teach judicial process there. And Nikki Shishido, who has worked for DBED, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism of the state of Hawaii in Beijing for some time. All these people have had the experience of living on the ground in China. We want to have them tell their stories to you. So maybe this will encourage you to send your kid or CEO to China. So if you're interested in this program, which ought to be very interesting, come down on August 22nd. You can sign up at hvca.org. I'm Jay Fidell. Mahalo. We'll see you there. Okay, we're back. We're live on a given Tuesday with ThinkTech Hawaii, streaming to you on audio, video, Ustream, the whole enchilada. We're talking about Asia in Review. More specifically, we're talking about going to China. And these two guys next to me, that is specifically Ken Sheffield and Justin Simcock, have been there, done that, and they're back to tell us about it. So let's continue with you, Justin. So you get there, you have Mandarin.
I do, yeah.
You're an adventurer. An intellectual adventurer is what you are. What did you do?
I went over there with a program through Berkeley that put me into Tsinghua University, which is the MIT of China. And I was studying for about a month, and then I had an opportunity to help lead a trade mission from Brazil to interact with some...
Your dream come true.
It was like manifesting right there.
Amazing. There's a God.
There is, you know. He has a sense of humor, of course, right?
She.
So I took a week off from school, and I was the sort of advisor / translator for this group of Brazilian agribusiness guys, and they're from a part of Brazil called...
Who said the truth is not stranger than fiction? At the time, you're still in your 20s, right?
I just turned 30 at that point, so yeah. So yeah, these guys had never been to Brazil. China, they didn't know anything about it, really. They knew it was an opportunity. And so it was the full thing. Like, me and 30 agribusiness guys went to pig farms, chicken farms, soy farms. We were in the embassy, in the Brazilian embassy. We were at the General Mills equivalent in China, doing a deal, discussing long term.
What city?
This was in Beijing, yeah. At the headquarters, and the Brazilians didn't, because I was brought in through a third party, through the company that was sort of running the mission, that was managing all the resources. The Brazilians didn't know that I wasn't Brazilian, and then the Chinese didn't know that I wasn't Brazilian, and so it was this kind of bizarre Because my
Funny you don't look Brazilian.
well, that is Brazil is like the United States.
I
You
know
can be
that.
from anywhere, yeah. So
So how did you get from there, to these escapades? Forgive me. To working for the Foreign Service in China, the
Yeah.
American Foreign Service.
I sort of ran through a set of opportunities the first time in Beijing and decided that because of my previous experiences, it'd be better to go back and work through the government. So I applied for the Foreign Service, returned.
There's a test.
There's a test.
How'd you like the test?
It's like any other test. There's a behavioral component. There's a written component. There's a multiple choice test, and it's all kind of mind games at the end of the day. And just, as long as
It's not that hard if you're well adjusted.
yeah, fair enough. As far as I'm concerned, and having been through enough mind games in the Navy, it was like, okay, this is just another
no
day,
problem.
right?
I know somebody who took it 4 times, by the way, and then became a brilliant Foreign Service officer.
It usually takes like 9 times. Some people have taken it 9 times, and it doesn't know usually. It could be 1 or 9 or whatever. So I took it once. So
Okay. See, we got really classy guests here on the show.
Well,
Thank you
at
for
least one of
introducing me
us.
to Justin, Ken.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I have my own suspicions as to why it was put 1 time, but that's fine. So yeah, then they sent me to Shanghai, and so I was.
So you never had to leave China?
I did come back to the United States, actually. Yeah, I was
sort
back.
of re-enter as a member of the Foreign Service.
I came back I was back home for more than 6 months, waiting for the thing to kind of go through, interviewing and processing and security and medical clearance and all these different things. And I was using my GIABIL to take some classes. And then they said, you're good to go. And so I had to go to Washington for a few months, and then they sent me to Shanghai after that. So that was good. I was.
Boy, what a life, Wow.
It was great. Yeah, I felt really
Those are
fortunate.
exciting times, my own experience leaving the country to come here was during the Vietnam War. It was
Yeah.
very exciting because so many things are happening. It was a special time in the '60s, but the '60s still lives in a funny way because you guys could find opportunities. You could go there, have these fantastic adventures, and go through the looking glass, as it were.
Very much so.
Yeah. So now I want to know how it was when you lived in China. When you got up in the morning and had your tea. How was it? Can you step me through? You start, kid. Can you step me through what it was like in the morning and whether you needed a gas mask or what?
Well, I found out upon getting to the country that I was well served by buying some Tiger Balm and wiping it right under my nose because my sinuses shut down immediately from the particulate in the air, from any number of sources, but mainly, I'm guessing, from the coal-fired plants that really...
This is in Nanjing.
That's right. And a typical morning, I still hearken back to the amazing street vendors that you'll find in China and the very unique foods that you'll find. So anything from a bowl of freshly made noodles costing pennies, converting back to American dollars, to a woman essentially using the inverted hubcap to cook little tortilla-like things that you would mix different vegetables in, and a youtiao in the middle, a sort of an unsweet, crispy donut with some spicy things layered in there, and munching that on the way to walking to class, and then going through
You
class.
never got sick from street food?
I would say at least once a week, if not more often than that. But my constitution held up, and I made it through.
Strength.
Yes, sir. Yes. And we would find on a pretty regular basis fun places to eat for lunch or dinner. At the time, very inexpensive, and I'm sure it's still like that in China. Although these days, I'm sure you can spend lots of money on meals in China as well. But really just relating with our fellow American students that were on the CIEE program, Center for International Exchange. When I got the grant from the National Security Education Program they wanted not to give me the money directly to go to China, which is understandable. They wanted us to use a particular NGO that organized the travel to China. So we were all on this mission or program from CIEE at the time, and we really bonded as about 30, 40 of us over in Nanjing.
So you were in a group,
That's right.
and you saw them every day.
That's right.
You weren't alone.
Not at all. We had people to support us. It was our own specials
Would
group.
it have been different if you had been alone? Just, I mean, change the facts here. Suppose you'd been living alone, you had to find your own place, you had to get around, you had to do what you had to do. Would it have been different? Would it have been less pleasant, more philosophically rewarding? What?
You know, I got a taste of that about 3 or 4 weeks into the program. We were given an extended week off to do our own traveling, and that happened at several times throughout the year. So I chose to, some people would go together on little jaunts. I went by myself, and some of the more adventurous of us did that. And that's where you really found out what you were made of.
What do you mean challenges that you wouldn't have? What kind of challenges are you thinking about?
So, for example, I wanted to visit Shanghai and a special Buddhist island off the coast in the eastern China Sea. It's called Putoshan. It's where the Bodhisattva Guanyin, the goddess of mercy essentially of Buddhism, at least the Chinese version. There are versions throughout all the Buddhist countries.
There are varying degrees of mercy, I'm sure.
Yes. So this was supposedly the island where she gained enlightenment, and temples dotted the island. So navigating my way to there, getting a boat there, walking around the island, staying there a night, finding a hotel. In fact, some of the more enriching experiences are when you wanted to make your own food, and this isn't particularly on this trip, but let's say you wanted to bring some vegetables back to the dorm and cook something yourself. Haggling in the marketplaces locally for fresh foods, and you're expected to do so, at least as a Chinese person, and it's Chinese people don't at that time have any other frame of reference.
Why don't you just pay what they ask?
They would ask pretty high prices. And that's
I know my wife, who was Japanese, she
Yes.
would pay whatever they asked. So don't make hay. Just pay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. In China, it's a game, and it's part of the social context of interchange, and it's very exciting.
You were comfortable. You never felt threatened.
Other than having the constant feeling of being watched, I didn't fear for my safety. People were very nice. Again,
You never went out of your way to offend anybody either.
that's correct.
Like YY, that movie recently. He was kind of a revolutionary. Went to jail for his attitude.
Ai Weiwei.
Yeah, Ai Weiwei. Yeah.
No, I wasn't that type of person. There was one interesting, I took off with one friend on a trip to Beijing during one of these extended breaks. So we were tasked with a week of gathering information in Beijing. I wanted to go visit Beijing opera houses. He wanted to visit architectural sites in Beijing. We struck a conversation up with a local Chinese woman on the 17-hour, at the time, train ride from Nanjing to Beijing. Sure, it's much
Now
shorter.
it's 20
these days.
minutes.
Yeah,
It's 5 hours
exactly.
now. Not even.
She invited us to stay at her dormitory for her company, and we certainly took her up on the idea. It turned out we were asked to leave the next day, and we found out that it was a missile factory that we were invited to live in. And we,
You didn't know about this.
so it was a very interesting experience. We found our next home in actually the Beijing Opera Academy of Beijing, and we stayed there for the rest of the
Could have
time.
made a movie about it.
Absolutely.
Well, we're making a movie about it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this is really, really interesting
So I
stuff. Did
felt
you
a
write a
little-
journal or a blog or anything?
I haven't, but I keep getting encouragement from my parents to do something about that, and I guess when my current work settles down a little bit, I'm in the midst of building a practice in a financial services company. I would love to write about it.
I'll tell you a short story about Will Moss. We invited Will Moss to come here from Beijing, and he's a PR guy he's an American guy out of a PR firm, a big PR firm in Seattle, and has lived in China for a long time. And he had a Chinese girlfriend, and he had a buddy who he worked with in his PR firm. And the two of them, the four of them, because there were two couples involved, would go dashing off to the far corners of China every weekend. And they would take a small video camera with them, and they would take pictures, and it was all hysterical because they would make fun. And then they'd put the video on a blog, okay? He said he had to keep moving the blog because the government kept shutting him down.
Wow.
So he would pop up here and then pop up there. But the power of what he was doing was humor. And he would go to these places where they hadn't seen a haole face in years, and they would have these conversations. They all spoke Chinese. They had these conversations with people. But it's that kind of thing that maybe they're watching you. They probably are watching you. But it's not a threatening thing.
That's right.
It's just informational, if you will.
That's right. And my roommate, who was the party member leader, the kindest guy. I believe last time I checked in, he was writing for the People's Daily, but really just a very down-to-earth person.
Well, okay, we're going to have to come down to earth after that story.
Yeah.
And for the moment, we're going to take a short break, okay? That's Ken Sheffield of Morgan Stanley and Justin Simcock of Academia Language School. And we're here talking about traveling to China, and traveling is broadening when you go to China these days. This is Think Tech Asia in Review. I'm Jay Fidell. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle in Cook, Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on Think Tech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
We're back, we're live, we're sharing stories of daring do in China with these two guys, namely Ken Sheffield and Justin Simcock. And it's your turn, Justin. Give us some stories of daring do.
Oh, goodness.
Tell us about the time you slept in a missile factory in the middle of Beijing.
Nothing as daring as that. I think we all do have these experiences that you have your day-to-day life, which is the sort of the grind that you exist in. In Beijing, it's intense. You know, the smells, the transportation, the eating, the people, all these different things. But then you have these episodic moments when you take these trips and it just like coalesces the experience. This is why I came here, you know. And so I had one incident where I flew out to a remote province called Gansu. We flew into the capital and we rented a car, my friend and I, who was a long-term China resident. He had a driver's license. And we drove.
Is that ill-advised to have a driver's license in China?
Well, for a number of reasons,
They got
yeah.
bicycles, 100 million bicycles in Beijing, all automated now.
I mean, I had a driver's license. I used to drive in Shanghai from time to time.
It's on the right side of the street anyway.
It is. But they do drive as if they're in a bicycle. Has been analyzed. They have yet to sort of understand the mechanics and the spatial dimensions of driving in a car. You know, so.
This makes it dangerous, especially if you're a pedestrian.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. People get hit all the time, in fact. So we rented a car, and it's very remote, and we drove about 1,000 kilometers through the desert over these 16,000-foot mountains into a place called Dunhuang, which is a traditional center of Taoism and Buddhism.
To the west.
Yeah, in the caves, the Mogao Grottos, where they dug into the caves and built these Buddhas. And that was really spectacular. You could see the stars out there, these dunes. But that was really not the most interesting part of the trip, because it's all paved and the most fascinating part I felt was you could see these, fields of photovoltaic, energy farms that they had built out there, and these windmill farms. And that was
This is what, 2011?
This is 2011, yeah, just massive. It goes into the horizon, and
They
looking.
do things big. Everything they do is big, isn't
Yeah, it was built, and yet they were at that point linking it up to the grid, and so you can see there is this consideration because it's obviously not being used where it's at, right? So it's like fueling a whole massive system. But we decided to drive south instead of going back to what became. We decided to drive southeast rather, over another mountain range and through an area.
Toward the ocean.
Well, we're way northwest at this point, and so we had to drive back southeast, and it's a fairly remote part of China.
Is this near Harbin? No.
No, we're in northwest China at this point.
Okay.
This is
Well, Harbin is like north.
That's northeast.
Okay.
That's the furthest northeast.
It's only 1,000 miles away.
It's significant. But this part is fairly remote, and it's also a military region, and so, a bunch of foreign guys driving around out there. There's no roads, in fact, out there. We were driving on unpaved dirt roads, but just spectacular scenery, like epically timeless, and
No pollution.
zero pollution, no people. And you have these beautiful valleys of grass and mountains and blue skies.
Agriculture.
Actually, this part, you're kind of on the Tibetan plateau, the very foot of it. So you see a lot of, there's a lot of mines up there, in fact. So most of the area is devoted towards extracting minerals from the environment. And a lot of nomadic life, in fact. The Mongolians, the Tibetans, the Kazakhs, the
All
Kyrgyz.
within China.
They're all living a fairly nomadic life that they have for,
Crossing the
generations.
border.
Well, they are nomadic peoples within China, and the minority peoples, effectively. So and you see them like living as they have been for, but now they have like a motorcycle and a horse instead of just a horse, right? So you get these really epic moments when you just realize this is just fantastic, and this is not going to happen anywhere else on the earth. So it's one of those type of moments.
Yeah. Wow. You gonna write a book?
Probably not going to write a book. I just talk story like this.
Okay, that's all right. We keep this film, we keep it.
This could be a record of it.
So did you were in the Foreign Service at the time this happened?
That I was a private citizen, and actually thankfully so, because the part of China that we were in, we were not supposed to be there, and we ended up trying to stay at a hotel in a small town in the middle of Qinghai province, in the middle of nowhere, and we were almost arrested for being illegally in this town. They had sent the foreign, how do you call this? The party official, the police came in. We were sort of harangued a bit for being there. I mean, throughout our trip, we had the police officers on the street saying, "Hey, look at the foreigners," and until we get to this town, then we became a problem. It was a bit, trying to reconcile those two different facts was a bit difficult, but
Geography.
yeah. So they ended up letting us stay, which thankfully so, and we left the next morning without any real incident, but we were monitored the whole night, and they followed us out of town. So if I had been in the Foreign Service at that time, there would have been a real incident, in fact. And I probably would have had, prior to going, I would have had to ask permission.
Yeah.
Because when you're on official status in any country,
You can't travel without permission.
you have to request permission to travel to certain places.
Yeah, because it could be a diplomatic incident or have
Absolutely.
diplomatic considerations.
Absolutely. Yeah. But at that point, I was just a young kid, private citizen, thank God.
Yeah, 2 years ago, yeah.
This is recently, in fact, yeah.
All things have changed now, eh?
Yeah.
Well, so you came back.
I came back.
Why?
So I came back for a lot of reasons. Principally, to be quite honest, my health was suffering.
This is the air?
The air, yeah.
Or was it intestinal? Or was it both?
To be fairly honest, I thought it was psychosomatic at first. That maybe it was a combination of all these factors. I lived abroad before, and it was never an issue. And then I did go and see a doctor, and he's like, "You have some real difficulty breathing. Your lungs are kind of being constricted right now."
From
From the pollution. Yeah. He was saying that I have similar, like I was a smoker, and I was in the military, very active guy, very athletic, and to be told that, it was kind of a shock. So.
So he was telling you you'd been injured. I mean,
Effectively.
that your lungs had been damaged. And,
yeah.
And how long were you there at the time this happened?
I wasn't there very long, I was there for a month.
1 or 2 years or less?
I was there for less than a year, Shanghai is actually not that bad. I mean, this is a very relative statement.
Beijing is worse.
Beijing is apocalyptically bad. And it seems ridiculous to say that, but to go there and experience it is to really have a moment of complete disbelief. You just don't even understand what's going on. So Shanghai was bad. We had some clear days, but you're affected by it. And I felt that it was not, I felt like I didn't want to compromise my health for it, because I was going to be a fairly China-heavy person because of my background, and I had a lot of experience in this. It's going to be back and forth to China for my whole career. And I thought, is this the only way to execute on this skill set? Is this the best way to execute on this skill set? Is this the highest value add for this skill set? And the conclusion was that it's not necessarily the answer.
If you could make trips, it'd be okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you left. Did you leave the Foreign Service?
I sure did, yeah. It was kind of a bittersweet thing, because you have all these great people and this great opportunity to represent your country, but
they didn't want you to leave.
Oh no, of course not. Yeah,
you were posted there. You're supposed to stay there.
For sure, yeah.
In bad air or not.
The reality is, though, the Foreign Service Department of State has recently enacted a new policy of letting people to what's called curtail, shorten their trip, shorten their tour.
For these kinds of reasons.
For this specific reason.
I'll tell you a short story. I mean, a New York City school teacher and his wife, who was in the arts, friends of mine, they went to a small town in the Northwest, maybe in this area, who knows, and it was a coal town. They were taking coal out, so there was coal dust everywhere. And the coal dust was on everything. Yeah. You know, you take food out of the refrigerator and you start preparing it for dinner, you look again and it's got coal dust all over it. So you have to cover it. You have to keep on washing everything to get the coal dust off. And I washed the clothes all the time because it was covered with soot. Okay, they really couldn't stand it. And they left and they went, this is a joke, but they went back to Beijing where the air was better.
Wow. That's saying something.
And ultimately they left.
Yeah.
And it was because they had a small child with them and they didn't want that child to be exposed to what you were exposed to. How was the air for you, Ken, when you were there? And that's a different city, different part of the country. What was your experience?
Yes, you know, it was a concern. I didn't have the option to leave. I just wanted to see through my year at university there. I guess I could have come back, but we probably spent a similar amount of time there and similar damage done to us during that time. It was a big concern. We noticed, just as you did, or your friend that told the story, soot covers everything, and coal-burning energy plants are the norm. I think, from what I've understood, by researching over time, that lots and lots of nuclear plants are coming online over time in China, so that may help dampen that effect over time. But coal is very much, as I understand, still in use. Can you confirm that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's a big
You didn't
issue.
get ill over it, though.
Not as such.
What about respiratory ailments? My own experience, I've been there 3 times, my own experience is it's only a matter of hours before my respiratory system begins to collapse.
Right, and I always had my Tiger Balm with me or these Vicks inhalers to just open up my sinuses. An interesting other part of my greater China story is that I spent about 3 or 4 years total in Taiwan from the late 90s to the early 2000s, where the air is much cleaner and the environment's a lot more tolerable. And
human environment and physical environment.
That's right.
People are much more welcoming there as well.
In Taiwan.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For political reasons, they're a lot more closely aligned to the U.S. style of thinking.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Okay, let's on that thought, we're going to be thoughtful about this. And we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk about the lessons you learned vis-a-vis life in Hawaii and in these United States? What did you learn that helps you now? Okay, well, this is Think Tech Asia in Review. We're here with Ken Sheffield of Morgan Stanley and Justin Simcock of the Academia Language School, at least for now. Okay, we're talking about how travel is broadening for those who care to live in Asia, and especially China. We'll be right back after this break.
This is Think Tech, broadcasting on Ustream and Spreaker both day and night, doing its thing on OC16 and OLEDO, and uploading videos all over YouTube. See the links on thinktechhawaii.com. Raise your awareness on Think Tech.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard of Kumu Kahua Theater, and when I was young I used to love watching Charlie Chan movies on Family Classic TV on Sunday afternoons. Our show at Kumu Kahua that runs from August 22nd through September 22nd is called Will the Real Charlie Chan Please Stand Up? It's written by Nancy P. Moss. It takes place right here in Chinatown. I really hope you'll come in and watch it. You will love it. It's everything about the movies that you loved and more. Go to kumukahua.org to get more information and your tickets. We'll see you there.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're Think Tech here on a given Tuesday. Okay, with Ken Sheffield and Justin Simcock, and we're talking about travel and how it's broadening, especially in China. And we're down to that part of the show. We're going to try to make some sense out of all of this. The good, the bad, the clean, the not so clean. And now you guys are both back, so lucky are we that you're here. But we need to know from you what you learned and how the experiences that you had there helps you here. Go first, Ken.
Well, directly, it's all about the language, for the purposes of being there in the first place in China.
Say something in Mandarin.
我要讲什么？我不知道应该怎么说。So basically,
Is that something about a massage?
not as such. Yes, not this time. Basically, the language, the ability to speak Chinese has kind of trailed off. I've been back for 10 years or so at this point from the Greater China region. I can still hold a conversation fairly well.
That's something. So, because you can't do that so easily here in Honolulu.
That's right. There are occasional times where in my work I'll come across folks that are coming from China or Taiwan or Hong Kong that are Mandarin speakers that need my help. And it's gotten me every job that I've had, that just that pure ability, whether or not it was of direct, immediate need for that employer, just the fact that I'd had that experience and I went that far to go to the region and spend a significant amount of my life.
I want to capture this. This is really important. So it's not so much that you needed this, to use your term, just a skill set. It's not so much that you needed the skill set, but that it demonstrated something to the person who was interviewing you about who you were and what kind of chutzpah you have.
That's right.
To go to China and take the challenge.
That's right. I'm fairly, when I like to study something, I go deep and wide, and I love to go to the original sources for things. So going to China as an Asian Studies undergraduate focusing on China was really everything to me.
It's on all levels. It's not only the experience on the ground, it's the academic. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I'm sure that in the back of my employers' minds, that the fact that China was emerging as a huge economic power, now the second largest economy in the world, there was the thought that I could use that as trade developed between the two countries.
Okay, but now take it on a larger level. Are there situations available to you, honest answer, here that would use your skill set?
I'll say that
Aside from Paycom. I'm only kidding about that.
I would say
We can
that
talk about that in your connection.
Good.
in my work, I originate a lot of original research. So I'll scan the globe, and particularly due to my experience in the region, I've lived in every East Asian country, Chinese speaking or Korean speaking or Tagalog speaking, Japanese
This
speaking.
is not all academic either. You went.
That's right. I studied the entire region. That comes into play in the research that I do on behalf of my clients when I invest for them. And
So you're specializing in investments in Asia.
as part of what I do, I look at specifically right now the United States, Europe, and Asia for
But it's
investment
all
opportunities.
overseas. You're the overseas man.
Somebody would definitely have a reason to choose me for that purpose. Absolutely.
And the reason, of course, is that you spent time, you looked around, you have a feeling for the economic pulse of these places.
That's right.
And I guess you follow the news, the economic news in all these places.
Deeply. In fact, Nikkei opened up at 2 p.m. today. I haven't seen how it's opening. I look at the yen dollar all the time. The Chinese currency isn't as freely traded anywhere near as much as other currencies, but I pay attention to that as well. Nikkei closes at 8 p.m. Europe opens up around 9 or 10, depending on the market. I'll watch that open. I'll go to sleep. I'll wake up. I'll see Europe close. I'll look at U.S. pre-market. I'm very dedicated.
Are you happy?
To my craft. I'm enthralled. I'm enthralled. I don't sleep very much, but I'm fully engaged.
Well,
Fully
people who don't
engaged.
sleep much usually are happy.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Okay, what about you, Justin? So you came back. What did you find? Did they care about all your skills? Did they give you a break on that? Did it help in some way?
I think you have to look at your experiences again through two different frameworks. One is that
That would be a yes or no.
I mean, sure, I value my own experiences and the enriching experiences that I've had. My employer, yes, the answer is yes, but it's nominal compared to what experience, the value that I have gotten out of these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
No one can take that away from me, and I can see the manifold value to the future for these things, whereas one employer might see you as one specific use for your skills. But more specifically, yes, I do use my language every day. In fact,
Well, in the language school. And you're teaching Mandarin or Portuguese?
I'm not teaching anything. Most of what I'm dealing with is interacting with former language learners who are looking for new opportunities, or teachers of foreign languages who are trying to find new students. And so I'm kind of a clearinghouse for skill sets effectively at this point. And because the school also is trying to attract students from East Asia, I'm working to try and bring some more Chinese students here to Hawaii to study. So that will require my language skills. But more importantly, it's just my worldview about where things are going.
Where are things going, Justin?
Well, I think inevitably so, from my small view of the world, is that, and from my experience in the consulate as well, the Chinese upper middle class is more and more enthralled with sending their kids to the United States. One, for the educational experience, and two, to get a foothold in America for investment purposes, for citizenship and purposes, and that whole set of opportunities that go along with that. And so if you can enable that process, and you know about that, the sort of rewards to that cohort of people for doing so, it's a good opportunity set, I think, for you. And so that's definitely one thing that I focus on quite a bit.
Now, you know what comes out of this? We only have 4 or 5 minutes left, but if that. But I wanted to ask you guys, so China is rebalancing internally. We know that because we had Chris McNally, who teaches at Chaminade in the East-West Center here yesterday. And his proposition is that China is rebalancing, and I mean, it could not work as well as they want, but it could work really well. And they are the number 2, as you mentioned, Ken, economy in the world, surpassing Japan by a substantial amount. You know, what Japan is at 5 trillion, China's at 8 trillion. We are at 16 trillion. So there's a way to go, but that gap is closing. And so I think it's clear to say, it's easy to say that China is doing very well economically, at least for the moment. Who knows what the future will bring, but let's assume that it continues to do well. The answer to my last question about what your skill sets, can give you changes when China becomes closer to the number 1 economic power, or even the even eclipsing the United States.
Right.
So all of a sudden, don't forget your Mandarin.
Exactly.
Because they're going to have huge influence, much more than they do now. So how do not only you, but we deal with that prospect? I asked him the same question. What do we do? What do you do individually? What does the country do to deal with this, competition in which we may find ourselves number two?
Well, to piggyback off what Justin just mentioned, there are many opportunities for affluent Chinese to move to other parts of the world for the same reasons that we're not in China right now, to escape, the health issues that, at the very basic levels. Not even to mention other issues such as political issues potentially. So for me, it's very much about, you're right, keeping in tune with my language ability and being able to serve as sort of a guide at the gate. Certainly lots of Chinese go to Los Angeles, Vancouver, West Coast, San Francisco, of course, but we find that Chinese are attracted to Hawaii as well, and I don't intend on leaving Hawaii. I've made it my home, and I want to be a person that serves as that middle person.
Well, I think what I hear you saying is that your time in China, for both of you, it's not ephemeral. It's lifelong.
Yeah, that's right.
That you will always wear the mark, have the brand, have that special je ne sais quoi. That's French.
Just say, yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you close, okay? Give us the porte-parole. That's also French.
There's not one unique incident. It's a series of experiences, right? And you'll always go back to them for sure. Chinese wasn't my first language. I spoke a bunch of different languages before, and I continue to encounter opportunities to go back to these places for work or for pleasure. And so I think with regard to China, United States, sending your child or your CEO to China should not be viewed as a one-off experience, but part of a general learning experience about what's going on in the world and the future, because they definitely will be a part of the future. And so I think if you have some good leadership to model that behavior, then really it becomes accepted amongst a larger class of people. And once that becomes ingrained and entrenched in the society, then those values will become much more ubiquitous.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Ken Sheffield and Justin Simcock, thank you very much. Travel is broadening, especially in China. This is Think Tech Hawaii Asian Review. I'm Jay Fidell. We'll be back shortly with more today on Think Tech. Aloha. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell. This is Think Tech Hawaii, broadcasting live from the Pioneer Plaza in downtown Honolulu. We raise public awareness about tech, energy, and globalism in Hawaii. Technology is critical to our state. A vibrant tech sector will give us new prospects in the global marketplace and will offer great careers and make our economy more resilient. Streaming live on Ustream and Spreaker, Think Tech allows its hosts and guests invaluable opportunities to report important events and discuss important questions, and to be heard here in Hawaii and around the world. You can find links to our live streams on thinktechhawaii.com or on our mobile website, m.thinktechhawaii.com. And you can see our archive on YouTube. It's all just a click away. We want to do whatever we can to keep Hawaii relevant, connected, and thriving in the complexity of the 21st century. We hope you will help us in those efforts. Tune in today. This is Think Tech. I'm Jay Fidell. Mahalo.